Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers with me, Madame Ziane. The headlines. 25 Palestinians were killed in 3 massacres committed by the Zionist occupation forces in the Gaza Strip during the past 24 hours. Next, Gaza Media Office reports over 47,000 Palestinians martyred or missing amid 8 months of Zionist aggression. Meanwhile, the catastrophic conditions persist. Renewed fierce clashes erupt in Sudan between army and rapid support forces near armored corps south of Khartoum for the second consecutive day. And Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives in Pyongyang for a state visit and is set to sign agreements with Kim Jong-un to deepen bilateral relations. Welcome back to the program. At the outset, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in the Gaza Strip announced that the death toll from the ongoing Zionist aggression on the Strip since October 7 has risen to 37,372 martyrs and 85,452 injured, most of whom are women and children. The ministry said that during the past 24 hours, the occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in the Gaza Strip, leaving 25 martyrs and 80 injured. Ambulance and civil defense crews have recovered the bodies of 8 martyrs and several wounded after Zionist occupation forces targeted a house in Nusayrat camp, central Gaza Strip. Additionally, 5 bodies were retrieved from commercial stores in the same area and taken to Al-Awda hospital, according to local sources. The occupation aircraft also targeted a house in Burayj camp, causing more casualties. Occupation warplanes carried out raids on Al-Mugharaka and Gaza Valley area north of Nusayrat camp and eastern Dir al-Balah in central Gaza.
3 boys and 2 girls. Her daughter was in the tawjihi. Is this not a sin for this young woman to go? What was my girl's fault? She was displaced and still young. Her children and husband, what fault of theirs was it for them to go? What did they do? What did they do? She couldn't feed her children when she came to us.
A government media office called for protection for medical personnel, calling on the international community and human rights organizations to open an international investigation into the crimes of arrest and execution of medical personnel.
We call on the international community to provide legal protection to Palestinian medical personnel and allow them to work freely during times of war without fear of arrest and without the threat of death and assassination. We urge international human rights organizations to open an investigation into the crimes of arrest and execution of Palestinian medical personnel by the Israeli occupation. This includes the execution of Dr. Iyad al-Rantisi and Dr. Adnan al-Barsh. Those responsible for these crimes must be referred to international courts for trial.
The government media office in Gaza has reported over 47,000 Palestinians, mainly women and children, martyred or missing in 8 months of Zionist aggression. The occupation continues relentless airstrikes and artillery shelling across the Gaza Strip amid catastrophic humanitarian conditions.
In Gaza, the disastrous humanitarian conditions are evident everywhere. Massacres, siege and displacement, as the Israeli occupation brutally targeted Palestinians. This genocide has persisted for 8 months. With ongoing Zionist atrocities, the occupation forces continue to launch dozens of airstrikes and artillery shelling across various areas of the Gaza Strip. The government media office in Gaza, in its latest update on aggression statistics, revealed that the occupation army has committed over 3,300 massacres against Palestinians, resulting in the martyrdom and disappearance of more than 47,300 Palestinians, mostly women and children. This includes over 15,700 child martyrs. Additionally, 17,000 children have lost one or both parents. Those remaining alive in Gaza face severe abuse, including displacement, famine, and lack of health care. About 3,500 children are at risk of death due to malnutrition, and over 1 million Palestinians suffer from infectious diseases due to displacement. With hospitals and health centers out of service due to ongoing aggression, tens of thousands of pregnant women, cancer patients, and others face the absence of treatment if they survive the Zionist massacres and targets. The Information Office's latest statistics show that the occupation dropped 79,000 tons of explosives on the Gaza Strip. The massive destruction inflicted on hundreds of thousands of residential buildings, places of worship, schools, archaeological sites, and others has been committed over 256 days. As the aggression continues, the end remains uncertain, with losses mounting without limit.
UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk expressed dismay at ongoing violations of international law in Gaza, citing Zionist airstrikes and humanitarian aid restrictions causing significant Palestinian suffering. He urgently called for these actions to stop. Let's have a listen.
Israel's relentless strikes in Gaza are causing immense suffering and widespread destruction. The arbitrary denial and obstruction of humanitarian aid have continued, and Israel continues to detain arbitrarily thousands of Palestinians. This must end. Palestinian armed groups continue to hold many hostages, and in some cases in densely populated areas, putting them and Palestinian civilians at further risk. The patterns we have documented raise serious concerns about the commission of war crimes and other atrocity crimes. I call for the binding decisions of the Security Council and of the International Court of Justice to be respected. The occupation must end, accountability must be served, and the internationally agreed two-state solution must become a reality.
The Islamic resistance movement Hamas affirmed that the chapters of the brutal starvation war waged by the terrorist occupation against the Palestinian people in Gaza continue, with escalating signs of famine and humanitarian disaster, especially in Gaza and northern governorates. In a statement on Tuesday, the movement stated that the Nazi occupation government practices the worst forms of collective punishment against isolated civilians by imposing a tight siege on the sector, closing crossings, preventing aid convoys from entering, and systematically suffocating and starving over 2 million people who lack the basic necessities of life and are subjected to continuous brutal massacres. Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ambassador Ammar Benjama, stressed on Tuesday during a UN Security Council meeting devoted to tolerance that the latter should be in line with international humanitarian law and the principles of the UN Charter.
And most broadly, the culture of peace as concept and ideals are deeply challenged nowadays in this current global context. Therefore, there is a need to confer a concrete sense to the endeavor toward tolerance beyond what is contained in the Resolution 2686. And in this regard, I wish to point out the following. First, considering the principle of tolerance in Council agenda has to go in line with the different calls made by the same Council for the respect of international law and the principles of the UN Charter.
Mr. Benjama pointed out that tolerance cannot be achieved amid the barbaric aggression perpetrated by the Zionist entity against the innocent Palestinian people, most of whom are women and children.
In the current context of international relations, tolerance cannot be materialized while we are in front of a barbaric aggression being perpetrated by the Israeli occupation forces against innocent civilians, including women, including girls and children in Gaza and in the occupied Palestinian territories. Tolerance cannot be achieved since one of its most blatant illustrations is rejected by the Israeli aggressors, which is the two-state solution.
The Al-Qassam brigades, the military wing of Hamas, stated that they shelled the headquarters of the invading Israeli forces south of the Tulkarm neighborhood in the city of Rafah, southern Gaza, using heavy caliber mortar shells. Additionally, Al-Qassam affirmed in a statement that they targeted 2 Israeli Merkava tanks with Al-Yasin 105 shells in the same area, as you can see in the footage. The Al-Qassam, or the Al-Quds brigades, the military wing of the Islamic Jihad movement, released video footage of their fighters alongside the Nasser Salah ad-Din brigades shelling the Kisufim military site with missiles.
أبو هلال تقبل الله عز وجل. اليوم نجهز بإذن الله بتاريخ 14/6/2024 رشق صاروخية تجاه المدن المحتلة نصرة للمستضعفين في قطاع غزة بإذن الله سبحانه وتعالى، وربنا يتقبل منا هذا العمل. القدس بالله يا رب. الله مولانا ولا مولى له. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. العزة لله. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. العزة لله.
Volker Turk, the United Nations Human Rights Chief, on Tuesday warned that the situation in the West Bank, including East al-Quds, was drastically deteriorating, while there had been unconscionable death and suffering in Gaza. He said that as of June 15, 528 Palestinians, 133 of them children, had been killed by occupation security forces or settlers since October, in some cases raising serious concerns of unlawful killings.
The situation in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is dramatically deteriorating. As of 15th of June, 528 Palestinians, 133 of them children, had been killed by Israeli security forces and/or settlers since October, in many cases raising serious concerns of unlawful killings. In the same period, 23 Israelis have been killed in the West Bank and Israel in clashes with or attacks by Palestinians, including 8 members of the Israeli security forces.
A fire erupted in agricultural area south of Metula settlement in northern occupied Palestinian territories after a missile from Lebanon fell. Hebrew media reported that this is the first missile launch from Lebanon after 48 hours of calm at the border. Sirens sounded several times in Israeli settlements near the Lebanese border. media reports suggested that US and British forces launched at least 6 strikes on Yemeni Houthi targets on Monday in retaliation for repeated attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. Local news outlets said the attacks targeted Yemen's Hudaydah International Airport and 4 strikes on Kamaran Island near the port of Salif off the Red Sea. U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein stressed on Tuesday from Beirut that ending the conflict between Hezbollah and Israel in a quick and diplomatic manner is an urgent matter, as he put it. Hochstein pointed out after his meeting with Parliament Speaker Nabi Berri that the continuous escalation between the two parties along the Blue Line for more than 8 months has continued long enough, stressing that it is in everyone's interest to solve the problem.
The conversations that I had here today in Beirut and the ones that I had yesterday in Israel, both are being conducted because the situation is serious. We have seen an escalation over the last few weeks, and what President Biden wants to do is to avoid a further escalation to a greater war. That is the effort here.
In Iran, presidential candidates held their first televised debate on Monday ahead of the upcoming snap elections later this month. 6 candidates are approved to run in the election following the death of Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash in May. Pilgrims continue to throw the 3 jamrat or pebbles on the second day of Tashriq, and those in a hurry may complete the Hajj rituals today and leave Mina before sunset, where they will head to Mecca to perform the farewell circumambulation without staying there. According to the Saudi news agency, the movement of pilgrims towards the Jamarat bridge was smooth and safe. Polisario Front has confirmed that the historic Zamla Uprising on June 17, 1970, led by the freedom fighter Sidi Ibrahim Basiri, marked the beginnings of Sahrawi national awareness. The representative of the Polisario Front in Switzerland and 2 international organizations in Geneva, Ambassador Abi Basharaya al-Bashir, explained in an article about the Zamla Uprising that the process adopted by the Polisario Front to impose the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination and independence would not have happened without the first giant step taken by the movement for liberation of Western Sahara, led by Mohammed Sayyid Ibrahim Basiri.
The Western Sahara Liberation Movement, led by the kidnapped Mohammed Sidi Ibrahim Basiri, had the greatest credit in shaping the beginnings of Sahrawi national awareness by framing the collective Sahrawi sense of distinction and spontaneous rejection of foreign authority, pushing it to form a collective awareness and turning it into a national political affiliation with clear goals of liberation and independence.
Libyans and the international community await Stéphanie Khouri's crucial briefing to the UN Security Council following extensive consultations with Libyan factions since Batili's resignation. Her address is poised to highlight the significant hurdles impeding Libya's political reconciliation efforts. Marwa Al-Aywar provides you with more details.
Key Libyan stakeholders.
2 months after Abdoulaye Batili concluded his tenure as head of the UN mission with the detailed assessment of Libya's challenges to the Security Council, Stéphanie Khouri, now acting head of the mission, has provided an update to the Council on the country's current situation. Ahead of her briefing, Khouri urged Libyan factions to prioritize unity and selflessness in decision-making, stressing the importance of making crucial choices that benefit the nation. The Libyan people have suffered enough, and it is time for ending this suffering to become the top priority for the Libyan authorities. I urge all Libyan parties to draw inspiration from the values of sacrifice and unity symbolized by the holiday, to make the necessary decisions and take actions to safeguard Libya's supreme interest and ensure prosperity for all its citizens. Khouri's briefing represents a crucial juncture as the international community closely tracks developments in Libya. Following the G7 summit in Italy, the international community has called on Libyan factions, through its concluding statement, to engage in genuine and unconditional dialogue to break the current political deadlock. Reviving Libya's political process remains a major challenge for the UN mission team post Abdullah Batili's resignation. Achieving national reconciliation is crucial for a Libyan-led solution, essential to overcoming entrenched disputes and divisions that defy international resolution efforts. Khouri's UN briefing coincides with Libya's launch of the first phase of its political solution, starting with voting for 60 municipal councils from June 9 to 23rd. This Libyan-led process, supported by the UN, aims to pave the way for free and fair elections, crucial for ending the country's decade-long crisis.
Deputy Speaker of the Council of Nations, Ahmed Kharshi, who also serves as the Vice President of the Executive Committee of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, IPU, will participate in the Executive Committee meeting of the IPU scheduled to be held tomorrow, Wednesday, in the city of Zanzibar, Tanzania. During the meeting, the committee will consider the impacts and practical means of implementing the Code of Conduct for governance officials in the IPU. It will also review the Memoranda of Understanding that the IPU will sign with the Development Initiative of the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, as well as with the Institute for Economics and Peace. Additionally, the committee members will be updated on the progress made regarding amendments to the IPU's status and regulations. The advisor to the President of the Republic in charge of the General Directorate of Communication at the Presidency, Kamal Sidi Said, visited the headquarters of the Algerian International Channel on Tuesday. He conveyed President Abdelmajid Tebboun's congratulations to the national media family on the occasion of Eid al-Adha. At the channel's headquarters, the advisor was welcomed by Masoud Al-Gham, President and Director General of the National Establishment for Communication, Publishing and Advertising, along with Salim Agar, Director General of Al24 News, and other executives of the institution. The President's advisor toured various departments and technical areas, extending his congratulations to journalists and staff for their noble media efforts. And in Sudan, local media sources reported renewed fierce clashes on Tuesday between army forces and rapid support forces around the Armored Corps vicinity south of Khartoum for the second consecutive day. The sources added that both sides are using heavy and light weapons in the ongoing confrontations. They mentioned that the army shelled gatherings of RSF in various areas of the capital from their positions north of Durman. Explosions were heard across most parts of Khartoum, with smoke rising around the conflict zone. And Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived last night in Pyongyang on a state visit at the invitation of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The visit to North Korea is the second for the Russian president in nearly 25 years. And Kremlin spokesman said a remark by NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg that the military alliance was holding talks on deploying more nuclear weapons was an escalation of tensions. Stoltenberg said that NATO members were consulting about deploying more nuclear weapons and placing them on standby in the face of a growing threat from Russia and China. Nabil Khazini has more details.
Russia and NATO stand at a crossroads of conflict again, hurling accusations, this time with a strong tone, the language of nuclear power. It all started on Sunday when NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that the military alliance is in talks to deploy more nuclear weapons. Moscow criticized Stoltenberg's comments, with Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov labeling them nothing else but an escalation.
А вот то, что сказал господин Столтенберг,
What NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said clearly on the very same day of the communiqué of the Ukraine conference in Switzerland, which was adopted and signed, but not by all participants. The communiqué describes such rhetoric as unacceptable. This is nothing but another escalation of tension.
как очередное нагнетание напряженности.
NATO chief Stoltenberg also said that the alliance could, for the first time, face a significant nuclear threat from two fronts, Russia and China. NATO's Secretary General went even further and accused Beijing of fueling the war in Ukraine by supporting Russia. China responded to that, urging NATO to do something for the political settlement of the crisis in Ukraine.
中方不是乌克兰危机的制造者和当事方。
China did not cause or was part of the Ukraine crisis and has always been committed to promoting peace talks. China's objective, fair position, and constructive role have been widely recognized by the international community. We advise NATO to stop shifting blame and sowing discord, not add fuel to the fire and instigate confrontation, but rather do something practical for the political settlement of the crisis.
切实为政治解决危机做点实事。
As warnings of nuclear threats mount and potentially serious consequences, the question remaining is whether humanity can navigate a path to peace before it's too late.
That's a wrap for tonight's program. Thank you for tuning in and have a great night.